Hello everyone, welcome to my channel. Morning light streamed through the tall windows of the ranch as Nikki Newman stood alone in the living room, fingers wrapped around a porcelain coffee cup that had long since gone cold. The silence in the house felt unnatural, too still, too careful. Her mind kept circling the same question. Where had Victor Newman really been? He had returned late the previous night, composed as ever, offering nothing more than a brief explanation about business and an unexpected delay. But Nikki had been married to Victor long enough to recognize when something was off. The faint tension in his jaw, the way he avoided her eyes for just a fraction of a second too long, the clipped, controlled tone he used when he wanted a subject dropped. He was keeping something from her. And Nikki hated secrets, especially in a marriage that had survived betrayals, kidnappings, corporate wars, and more enemies than most families could count. Upstairs, Victor adjusted his cufflinks in front of the mirror. His reflection stared back at him, calm and calculating. He had done what he needed to do out of town. What Nikki didn't know couldn't hurt her. In his mind, shielding her from the truth was an act of protection. He had enemies circling again, and he was preparing for war. But Nikki wasn't a woman who needed protection from the truth. She stepped into the bedroom doorway just as he slipped on his jacket. "You're up early," he said smoothly. "I couldn't sleep," she replied, studying him carefully. "Travel delays." "Oh yes, that's all." Victor walked toward her and kissed her cheek. "Business handled, nothing for you to worry about." Nothing to worry about. That was precisely what worried her. At Newman Enterprises, Victoria Newman stood near the window of her office, staring down at Genoa City. Her reflection in the glass looked thoughtful, softer than usual. When the door opened and Nate Hastings stepped inside, that softness deepened. "You look like you didn't sleep," Nate observed gently. "Is it that obvious?" "Only to someone who's paying attention." That small comment warmed her more than it should have. Victoria turned fully toward him. "My father's back, but he's being evasive." Nate nodded. "That's not exactly shocking." "No," she admitted with a faint smile, "but it feels different." He stepped closer, lowering his voice. "You can't control Victor, you can only control how you respond." Victoria met his gaze. There was something steady about Nate, something grounding. After years of volatile relationships, betrayals, and emotional warfare, that steadiness felt like oxygen. "You always know what to say," she said softly. "Occupational hazard," he teased. But neither of them stepped away. The space between them grew charged, not dramatic or explosive, just quietly intimate. Victoria reached for a file on her desk and their hands brushed. Neither pulled back immediately. A warm moment. One that hinted at something more. Victoria's lips curved into a smile she hadn't allowed herself in months. Lunch later. "I'd like that." And for once, the tension in her world didn't feel suffocating. Across town, in a very different atmosphere, Daniel Romalotti stood in the middle of his apartment staring at his phone. His thumb hovered over the screen. He should have done this years ago. The toxic cycle with Phyllis Summers had defined so much of his adult life. Her schemes, her manipulations, her desperate need to control the narrative. Daniel loved his mother, he always would, but loving her didn't mean enabling her. And lately, she had crossed lines he could no longer ignore. He finally pressed call. Phyllis answered on the second ring. "Daniel, I was just thinking about you." "That's funny," he said flatly. "I was thinking about you too." She paused, immediately sensing the shift in tone. "What's wrong?" "What's wrong?" he echoed. "How about the lies, the interference in my work, the way you keep dragging me into your battles with the Newmans?" "I'm protecting you." "No," Daniel snapped. "You're protecting yourself." Silence crackled on the line. He took a steadying breath. "I can't keep doing this, Mom. I can't keep cleaning up your messes or pretending they don't exist." "You're overreacting." "Am I?" His voice softened but remained firm. "When was the last time you trusted me to make my own decisions?" Phyllis struggled for an answer. "That's what I thought." He closed his eyes briefly. "I need space, real space. No more pulling me into schemes, no more manipulating situations in my name if you can't respect that." "Daniel." "Oh, then I'm done." The word hung in the air. "Done." Phyllis's breath caught. For the first time in years, her son wasn't wavering. "You'd cut ties with your own mother," she whispered. I'm not cutting you out of my life, he said carefully. I'm cutting myself out of your chaos. And with that, he ended the call. His hands shook slightly, but there was something else beneath the fear. A relief. Back at the ranch, Nikki sat alone again, replaying every detail of Victor's explanation. Something wasn't adding up. She had learned long ago that when Victor insisted there was nothing to worry about, it usually meant there was everything to worry about. As she picked up her phone, if he wouldn't tell her the truth, she would find it herself. Because one thing Nikki Newman had never been was helpless. By afternoon, tension had settled over Genoa City like a storm cloud. Victor was in his office at Newman Enterprises when his assistant informed him Nikki had called twice. He frowned. Nikki didn't chase, she confronted, which meant she was digging. He dialed her number immediately, Nikki. Victor, she answered coolly. I spoke with one of the contacts from the conference you supposedly attended. A beat of silence. There was no conference. Victor's jaw tightened. He should have anticipated this. I handled a private matter, he said finally. Private from your wife's. I didn't want you dragged into it. You don't get to decide that for me, Nikki shot back, hurt flashing through her voice. We're partners, or at least I thought we were. Victor closed his eyes briefly. He hated when his protective instincts created distance between them, but the threat he'd been investigating was serious, serious enough that he couldn't risk Nikki becoming collateral damage. I was neutralizing a situation, he said carefully, one that could impact this family. And you didn't trust me enough to tell me. That accusation landed harder than any corporate attack. I trust you with my life, he said quietly. Then act like it. She hung up. Victor stared at the phone for several seconds before setting it down. He had faced down enemies, survived assassination attempts, and built an empire from nothing. Yet the one battle he never quite mastered was the one at home. Meanwhile, Victoria sat across from Nate at Society, the restaurant buzzing softly around them. You're smiling, Nate observed. Am I? Yes, it's new. She laughed softly. Maybe I'm trying something different. Different can be good. Their food arrived, but the conversation flowed so easily neither seemed eager to eat. They talked about work, about family, about the exhaustion that came from constantly being on guard. Victoria leaned back in her chair. With you, I don't feel like I have to fight. You don't. Their eyes locked again, and this time the tension wasn't subtle. It was undeniable. Nate reached across the table, his fingers lightly brushing hers. You deserve peace, Victoria. Her breath hitched almost imperceptibly. Careful, she murmured. You're dangerously close to becoming indispensable. He smiled. Would that be so bad? She didn't answer. But when they stood to leave, she didn't let go of his hand right away. One step closer to something hotter. Something neither of them could ignore much longer. At the Grand Phoenix, Phyllis paced her suite like a caged animal. Daniel had cut her off. Her own son. She replayed the conversation over and over, searching for weakness, for a way to twist it into something less final. But there hadn't been one. He had meant every word. For the first time, her usual defenses felt thin. She had always justified her actions as protection, as strategy, as love expressed through control. But maybe Daniel was right. Maybe she was protecting herself more than anyone else. Her phone buzzed. She glanced at the screen, no message from Daniel. The silence was deafening. As evening fell, Nikki returned to the ranch. Victor was already there, standing near the fireplace. She walked in without speaking. I never meant to hurt you, he said. You don't mean to, she replied, but you do. He stepped closer. The threat is handled. What threat? Victor hesitated, and in that hesitation, Nikki saw everything. There's always another enemy, Victor, another battle, another secret. I can handle the truth. What I can't handle is being shut out. He reached for her hands. This time she let him. I forget sometimes, he admitted, that you are stronger than anyone I know. Then stop forgetting. A fragile truce settled between them, not fully healed but not shattered either. Across town, Victoria stood outside Nate's door after he walked her home. You're thinking, he said softly. I always am. All about whether I'm ready to let myself be happy. He cupped her cheek gently. You don't have to decide tonight. Her heart pounded. And when she finally leaned in, the kiss was slow, deliberate, full of promise. Not reckless, not desperate, but powerful. A warm moment turning into something undeniably hot. And in his apartment, Daniel stared at an old photo of himself and Phyllis. He didn't regret what he'd done, but it still hurt. Cutting ties, even partially, was never easy. Yet he knew if he didn't set boundaries now, he would spend the rest of his life trapped in the same destructive cycle. He placed the photo face down on the table. He was choosing his future, even if it meant disappointing his past. In different corners of Genoa City, marriages were strained, new romances were igniting, and family bonds were being tested. Victor believed secrecy was protection. Nikki believed truth was strength. Victoria was stepping toward love again. And Daniel was finally stepping away from chaos. The choices made that day would ripple outward, through boardrooms, through bedrooms, through family dinners and corporate wars. Because in Genoa City, nothing stayed quiet for long. And every secret eventually demanded its reckoning.